בלבובי משכן אבנה לדר כבוידו ולמשכן מזבח עושים לקרני הווידו בלבובי משכן אבנה לדר כבוידו.
Welcome to another edition of Torah Perspective. A few days and we will have Shabbos Hagadol. We will have the Shabbos before Pesach. Those of us who frequent synagogues will be interested in what the rabbi has to say, or they will endure what the rabbi has to say, as the case may be. In the afternoon, in many synagogues, there will be what's called the Shabbos Hagadol Droshe, a learned discourse by the rabbi where you can show off. It's a little bit like a cadenza in a violin concerto, where the virtuoso at the end of the first movement bursts out in most fantastic virtuoso music making. I thoroughly enjoy it. Many rabbis will add some uplifting message. And then there are those rabbis who devote the entire afternoon to, let's say, not technical virtuoso Torah discourse, but to other insights. Everybody does it in his own way. Many of our Gedolim have left us Shabbos Hagadol droshes that are fantastically insightful. There's the Maharal's Shabbos Hagadol droshe. There's the Shloah HaKodosh, also has a Shabbos Hagadol droshe. Sometimes goes on for pages and pages and pages. Many of them are highly philosophical, very insightful. I have nothing to offer of that kind, but I can look at this week's Seder, look at our preparations for Pesach, and then say something about the Hagadol. And you may ask, what is the unifying theme here? Our Seder this week highlights two different korbanos right in the beginning of the Seder. It devotes a number of psukim to the korban olah, to the burnt offering. And then it continues to spell out the various halachas connected to the korban shlomim, the so-called peace offering. Now, all these terms are the efficient translations of what the Hebrew says. Korban olah. The word olah means to go up, uplifting. And it is called the burnt offering because it was burnt in total. By the way, that is what the Greeks called an holocaust, a holy burnt. When we use the word holocaust for mass murder, we are actually using a term that comes from the sacrificial service. And it may not be the best way to describe this because I don't think that murdering millions of innocent people can be likened to bringing a korban, to bringing an offering. That looks like human sacrifice. I say that, but on the other hand, when Rabbi Yochanan Wasserman, the Rosh Hashiva of Baranovic, was arrested by the Lithuanian nationalists, not by the Nazis, but the Lithuanian nationalists, with a group of yeshiva bochim. They were brought to the place of execution. They were murdered there. But one survived and reported afterwards what Rabbi Yochanan said to the yeshiva bochim as they were on their way to their death. And he said, cleanse yourself from all improper thoughts. We are about to be killed, And may our sacrifice be effective for the rescue of the American Jews. Rabbi Chanan had been in the United States before Lithuania was invaded by the Nazis. And he knew very well to what kind of Europe he would return. But he said, I can't leave my yeshiva alone. And he returned from the United States to Lithuania to his death. So he used the language of sacrifice, but we must be very careful to distinguish between the perspective of Rebbe Chanan, who was going to his death, and the people who murdered him. The people who murdered him certainly did not bring a sacrifice. But the person who gets murdered, martyrdom, is a form of sacrifice. This is the common aulo, which, as I said, in Greek is called the holocaustos, holy burnt. Kastos meaning, of course, stick means burning. And holo is the same word as the English word whole. Like in a holistic. Be that as it may. The second type of korban that is mentioned is the korban shlomim. And the korban shlomim is translated as peace offering. The two types of korbanos, aulo on one side, shlomim on the other side, are the two extremes of the spectrum. In last week's Seder, there was a lot of attention paid to the korban chatas, which is somewhere in the middle. The interesting thing about aulo and shlomim is that they're both voluntary offerings. Nobody can oblige you to bring an aulo. Nobody can oblige you to bring a shlomim. I'm saying nobody can oblige you. That's not entirely true. You can oblige yourself by undertaking to bring a korban shlomim. There's, however, one exception where there is an obligation to bring a korban shlomim, and it's the korban pesach. Because the korban pesach is technically a shlomim offering, in that the major part of the animal is being eaten by the one who brings the korban. In the case of the korban pesach, by the group of people who are counted in you have to invite them beforehand. You have to say this korban pesach is for this group of people, and everybody is obliged to bring a korban pesach. So of all the korbanos that are called shlomim, the korban pesach is the one that you're obliged to bring. And we will return to that aspect in a moment. An aulo is completely voluntary. You can understand why. A korban chatas, that we discussed last week, has to do with something that went wrong in your relationship to God, or in your relationship to the Jewish way of life. You made a mistake. You derailed your Jewish life. You didn't do this on purpose, because if you do it on purpose, you can't bring a korban chatas. It's only for inadvertent transgressions. But it's nevertheless, it shows your carelessness and your lack of dedication to a faithful exercise of your duties as a Jew. So therefore, the korban chatas is there to repair this relationship. And therefore, it is shared between the Kohanim and the altar. It is not being eaten by the Baalim, by the one who brings the korban. Korban aulo, nothing to do with the Kohanim. It's going to be burned. It's totally dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it is another aspect of our relationship with God, where it is not a matter of, am I doing the right thing? Or am I on the right track? No, it has to do with, where is he? How do I get into contact with him? Where you stand in awe of God. And the only thing that you can do is say, here it is. I can't do more than giving you this, which comes from my possessions, from my human civilization, you could say, a product of my economy, a product of my activity in the world. And I'm saying, it's not mine, it's yours, I give it to you. And it's burnt, and it goes up, and it disappears. Where it goes, you don't know. It disappears. It is being, if you want to use the word, completely spiritualized. It's the matter becomes smoke. The Shlomim is on the very other end of the spectrum. The Shlomim is basically a barbecue. That's what it is. It is a way of celebrating a relationship. It is inviting, it's almost inviting God for a party. Right? Inviting God for a party. You want to celebrate something, you want to celebrate your recovery from an illness, for example. Korban Todo is Islamic, right? And you want to say, this is not only my private celebration, it's something that I want to share. I want to share it with my friends, I want to share it with my community, and I want to share it with Hashem. That is where a Shlomim comes in. Of course, in our world, we cannot properly appreciate the entire Seder Korbanos. It's a world that's so alien to us. If we look at it from a distance, all we see is an abattoir, all we see is a slaughterhouse where animals are being killed the whole day. Obviously, that's not what it is. We would not sit on the floor and mourn the loss of our Beis HaMikdash on Tisha B'Av if we would just have lost a slaughtering facility. This is not what it is. We cannot even imagine what the world with the Beis HaMikdash is. It's a different world. It's a different... if you would have shown Isaac Newton my mobile phone, he would not have recognized it because it comes from a different world. Right? Likewise, Hagadol, we have not an inkling of what it is that the Beis HaMikdash and the Seder Korbanos represented in our national life. What we do understand is the underlying ideas. We can learn these parshas and learn from the nature of an Olah, the nature of a Shlomim, and draw our conclusions. We know what it is to share a celebration, a family celebration, to have a simcha. We know what it is to not have that as a purely private affair, meaning private, nothing to do with Hashem. No, we want to elevate that, and we want to share that. We want to give it, how do I say this? We want to give it a religious meaning. That's not what I mean. We want to give it a true spiritual meaning. And thereby sanctify what we have, sanctify our lives, sanctify our life events. That's a common Shlomim. Question is, what about the common Pesach? Question is, what's about the common Pesach? If you learn what the common Pesach meant, and there is plenty of literature about it, plenty of our classical commentaries explain the meaning of a common Pesach, I'm sure that you've all heard that it was a demonstration of loyalty to Hashem and a complete rejection of idol worship, because the sheep or the goat or the lamb was regarded by the Egyptians as a divine animal, as an idol, as an embodiment of something divine. And early on in Sefer Bereshis, we already hear that shepherds were a despised profession in Egypt, yeah? Which was one of the reasons why Joseph advised the brothers, tell Pharaoh you want to live somewhere separate, in a separate neighborhood, northwest Egypt. South London, something like that, somewhere outside of the sight of Egyptians, because they don't like shepherds. There's a little bit a deeper meaning to that, because shepherds are people who control their flock, who are in charge of the flock, who are dominating over the animal, And therefore, in spiritual terms, there are people who dominate over their own internal animalistic tendencies. Whereas in Egypt, they elevated those animalistic tendencies and made gods out of them. They elevated their basest drive. That's why it's called Ervas Ha'oretz. That's why it's called the Ervo means the nakedness or the shamelessness of the world. That's what Egypt is. Egypt was the shamelessness of the world, at least in our view, when we confront the Egyptian civilization and deny their most essential values by taking a common Pesach and slaughtering the animals and doing it in their face. And we did it in Egypt, inside the houses, and we put a sign on the door with blood. Now, I should point out to you that this sign was not on the outside as a kind of a mark. When these things are being shown in popular movies, and there's some movies have been made about Prince of Egypt or whatever they are, very often this sign is like a sign of blood on the outside of the door. That's not where it was. It was on the inside of the door. Because not a sign for the outside world, it was a sign for us. Here Egypt ends, and we are outside of Egypt. We are now already outside of Egypt. That was the common Pesach. We are outside of Egypt. The Medrash says that the whole Jewish people was transported magically from Mitzrayim to Jerusalem, to the Arabais, to bring a common Pesach on Arabais. Anybody who takes this Medrash literally has just completely missed the point. It's not some fairy tale story about some magical journey. It's not Harry Potter, for goodness sake. This is about what it means to bring a common Pesach. You cannot bring a common Pesach in Egypt. The two notions, Egypt and common Pesach, are a contradiction with each other. So therefore, the moment you bring a common Pesach, you're outside Egypt. You're already on the grounds of Harabais. You're already in the temple service, because that's what Seder Kabbalah is about. Seder Kabbalah is about the control of those animalistic part of us that is ours. It's us. We are. That's why we are being told when you bring a common, your thoughts should be, that is me. That animal is me. The difference is you want to control the animalistic tendencies of the animal. You got to kill it. You want to control your own animalistic tendencies. You don't kill it. You don't become a monk. You don't become withdrawn from the world. You do the opposite. You take it and you elevate it, like you can bring an olah and bring the entire thing, that's why it's called an olah, goes up. This was Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim. Korban Pesach, so as we've just now tried to elucidate, Korban Pesach has two iterations. There is the Korban Pesach, which is called Pesach Mitzrayim, and there's the other Korban Pesach, which is called Pesach Hadoros. There are actually different sets of halachas. When you hear people speak about the Korban Pesach, it is usually, they're talking about Pesach Mitzrayim. What it meant then, on the eve of our Yetzias Mitzrayim, on the eve of our leaving this land of Egypt, this land where the constrictions of living in the created world, Mitzrayim comes from Yetzira. Yetzira means getting a form, but it also means being restricted. The two notions are related to each other. To give something a form, to make something concrete, you restrict it. As long as you have not made it concrete, as long as it is abstract and it is an idea in your head, you have not formulated, you have not said it, you have not given it form, it is still mutable, and you can, the moment it's like that email, right? You have an idea that you want to write this email, and then you actually write it. You better have a good look before you click send, right? Because it has a tzura, it has a form, and you can't change it anymore. Once you send it, Nobody has ever unsent an email. Nobody has ever unsaid a word. Nobody has ever unsaid an insult or a declaration of love. The moment you say it, it's there. So our entire life is like that. We say something, we give something form, we sculpt our life, and then have to live with the consequences. Of course, on the grander scale, the entire creation is like that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us form. We are matter with form, and we have to live with the consequences. And the trick is to take that form and to elevate it. In Mitzrayim, it is a constriction. Mitzrayim, it's Mitzorim, it is the constriction. The constriction also of living with a duality. The word Mitzrayim is a dual word. And Mitzrayim means the two. Actually, the pharaohs had a crown, had a double crown. And the country was always split into two. Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. The whole country is about two. I've mentioned it in a talk before, that the gematria of Mitzrayim is 380, whereas the gematria of Canaan, the land that we are going to when we leave Mitzrayim, is 190. Egypt is the double of, so it's a journey from 2 to 1. And that's the journey of the whole of mankind, to go from duality, from seeing opposites, to realizing that the opposites are two sides of exactly the same coin, that it all comes from one single source. That there are no forces of good and evil in the world. There's only one force in the world, it's Hashem's force. And therefore, evil is not something to hate. Evil is something to disarm and turn into good. It's called an hipuch. It's called a turning around. I apologize for going off on a tangent again, but the notion of hipuch, of turning around, is beautifully symbolized in the Hebrew letter Vav. Sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a Vav, which has a dual function. We know it in grammar as a Vav HaHipuch and a Vav HaChibur. The Vav HaChibur is the connecting Vav. The word Vav means connector, right? It means an hook. And the Vav HaHipuch is the grammarians call it the conversive Vav, the Vav that turns around, that turns past into future and future into past. Right? So the word, the connector of the Vav has this dual nature that it casts and connects at the same time, and it's the same letter. It's the same letter. It's a letter, of course, that features prominently in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, which is a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. And it can be read as the Yud is a Hey and a Hey. Right? Yud, K, Vav, K. A Yud and a Hey and another Hey connected by a Vav. To tell you, just like the Hey is 5, yeah? 2 5s make a 10, that the 10 at the beginning is the same as the sum of the 2 5s. It's that journey from 2 to 1. A journey that we also see in the letters of the Torah. The Torah starts with the base of Bereshis, and it goes to the Aleph of Mamad HaSinai, of the Sinaitic revelation, which starts with the word Onochi, Onochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. Okay, Korban Pesach is being brought in Mitzrayim, and it is, everything about Korban Pesach says 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It cannot be divided up. It must be roasted whole. You can't break a bone. All the various aspects are expressions of the notion of 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Mm-hmm. Of course, the whole word shlomim, sholem means whole, means complete. This is the Korban Pesach. What about the Korban Hadoros, the Pesach Hadoros? That is, we Jews have an obligation this year as well. If the Beis HaMikdash is being built tomorrow, we'll all be in Yerushalayim next week to bring a Korban Pesach. This is what we need to do. The fact that we can't do it is almost a mere technicality, right? But we are still under obligation to bring a Korban Pesach every year. Pesach, how do we bring a Korban Pesach today? What's the Korban Pesach? Our Korban Pesach is our Seder, right? Not that it is a Korban Pesach. Chas v'sholom. We are actually very careful to not eat lamb's meat at the Seder, right? We Davke do not eat lamb's meat, so that nobody can say he's trying to make a kind of a fake Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is a Korban Pesach, can only be brought in a certain way. That's not what we're doing. However, the bringing of the Korban Pesach, the obligation on every Jew to bring a Korban Pesach is an extraordinary obligation. There are two mitzvahs that we have to perform, for which the sanction, if you don't do it, is kores, is spiritual extinction. It is Korban Pesach and Bris Milah. We have to do those two things. At the Seder, we actually quote a pasuk from Hagadol when we say "B'domai chai," and it means you shall live in your blood, and it is interpreted as the two bloods, namely the blood of the Bris Milah and the blood of the Korban Pesach. So the obligation is an absolute, very stringent, very important obligation. Why? Why? I'll tell you why. It is so easily forgotten. It is so easily forgotten where we came from, what the beginning of our journey was, and that the journey still continues. That's why we hammer this in. The primordial Jewish experience is the Leila Seder. Right? I remember years ago, I worked in a company we had, in those days you still had a receptionist who would answer the phone and who would let the guests in. Today, no company has, especially, well, maybe in big office buildings they still have a reception desk, but smaller companies don't bother with that anymore. But in those days, everybody had a receptionist. We also had a receptionist, who was a Jewish girl, not from any observant background. And I said to my wife, we should actually invite Andrea for Seder. Let her experience a Seder. And my wife said, yeah, very good idea. So I went to her a couple of weeks before Pesach, and I said, Andrea, my wife and I would like to invite you for the Seder. She said, oh no, I'm going to my mom and dad. I'm going to my mom and dad. Because a Jew, he may be far away. I remember in the old days on Golders Green Road, you had country markets opposite the shul where I davened. You had country market, and they had a Pesach assortment, and they would stock up on kosher Pesach products. It was not a Jewish shop, but yeah. Shabbos afternoon, Shabbos Hagadol, you would see the Jews driving up to country market to stock up on their Pesach products, because it's going to be a Seder. Another year I was going to one of the large kosher shops to do some last minute shopping 2 days before Pesach, and I was standing at the freezer and cool section, and it was margarines. And there was a girl standing next to me with a lot of her of the top of her trousers and the bottom of her t-shirt were not exactly at the same place. There was a lot of, let's say, exposed nature there, and there was a lot of metal through her nose, ears, and what have you. And she picks up a piece of margarine, a pack of margarine, and she turns to me and she says, "Is this hechsher reliable?" It taught me a big lesson. First of all, do not judge people by their looks. And the second thing is, don't underestimate the power of the Korban Pesach, the Pesach Hadolas, the Korban Pesach for all generations. The other side of that is that what I said, it is so easily forgotten. All you have to do is speak to people who have survived 70 years of communism in Russia and see how easy it is to make people lose their connection to their Jewishness. It's really a miracle that people feel this stirring after 2, 3, 4 generations sometimes of being estranged from their Jewishness, that there is this, what you call the pinteliid, the little spark inside that can come back. And we brandish this about and take it for granted. Yeah, of course, there's a Jewish fire somewhere in there. You know how remarkable that is, how stunning that is. Do you find, that Boris Johnson feels the little Turk inside? Well, his great-grandfather was a Turk. It is so easily forgotten. And I mean that in a very literal sense. Not it is forgotten from our memory, but it is actually factually true that if, God forbid, the observance of the Seder would cease to be in the world completely, everywhere, then in a very real sense, Yetzias Mitzrayim never happened. It just never happened. It's now gone.
It's impossible,
we see this in Holocaust denial. Give it another 50 years, and it's only because we have a kinna on Tisha B'Av that we will remember this. However crazy it may sound, it's very easy that things just disappear from history, because we have this misunderstanding, misapprehension of what history is. We are being spoiled by technology, because I'm recording this talk and my phone is here on the tripod, and I'm recording it, and therefore now I have a record of what happened in the past. Of course, I do not have a real record of what happened in the past, because all I have is my voice and a little frame there, a pixelated frame, which is just a representation of something, but I cannot see you, and I cannot see you, and I cannot see you, I cannot see the people around the table. The interaction is gone. It's not a real record of the past. What it is a rapid dropping in the present that gives me a hook on which I can hang my memory, which happens in the present. There is no window on the past. There is no such thing. All we have is what we do today. And all we have of Yetzias Mitzrayim is our Leil HaSeder and our continued existence as a Jewish nation in the world. It is something that happens today, not something that happened in the past. And that is, I think, the deeper meaning of what we say in the Hagadol. B'chol dor v'dor chayev odom liras es atzmo ki'ilu hu yotzo miMitzrayim. That is not just a figure of speech. It is the only way in which we actually left Mitzrayim, is if we make a Seder every year. That's the real meaning of this. And with this, I leave you. I wish you a Kushre Pesach, uplifting Seder. Seder with a lot of discussion. By the way, if you don't have the answers at the Seder, this is not the point. The point is the questions. Right? We have a halacha that the difference between remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is something that we have to do every day, which we do every day in the third parsha of Krishma, we remember, right? But we have a special mitzvah on the Leil HaSeder, and one of the differences is that it's derech she'elo, that it has to be done by questioning. Nobody says it has to be done by answering. It has to be done by questioning. So if you question and you debate and you try to wrestle, what does this mean for me? And you ask the question, you ask this, manishtano, what is the difference? Then you will possibly, at the end of the Seder, be able to say, Echad, מי יודע? כושר פסח.
והוא היה, והוא עובר, והוא עובר, והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא בחפצה כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא, ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא. והוא היה והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא בחפצה כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא, ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא. והוא היה והוא עובר בתפארה, והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארה.